The Canadian Real Estate Association says home sales dropped sharply between December and January, falling 14.5%. Home sales have reached their lowest level in 3 years, but are still on par with the 10-year average. Sales climbed to a record high in December ahead of new mortgage rules and an interest rate hike that took effect in January. The association says most of the declines came from the Toronto area markets. To tell us more, we have real estate expert Tom Storey, a Royal LePage agent, joining us from our downtown studio in Toronto. Thanks for your time, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So what does this sharp drop indicate to you?
Well, I think there's a few factors. Firstly, at the end of 2017, there was a lot of buyers trying to get into the market before these new regulations with OFC came into place. So that was the big one. As we move into 2017, there was a few others as well. You know, we had an interest rate hike halfway through January, and most of all, it's been really, really cold. And, you know, you don't want to go to open houses at minus 25.
Yeah, of course. So that's probably why spring is such a busy time. But I'm curious about how this may affect homeowners and buyers.
I think as we move forward into this year, if you're looking at the Canadian market in general, it's going to be a year with an uptick. You know, we have the urban markets like Toronto and like Vancouver. They're always going to keep the average prices up. What has happened, though, is that gap between supply and demand, it is still very, very large. So even with these new regulations, the new mortgage rules going up and the rates going up, there's still such a big gap that even if it takes a handful of people out of the market, it's still going to move upwards.
So you're saying this is not necessarily a time for perhaps people who want to sell their home to be panicking?
Not at all. As we've seen, and why the numbers were actually lower in January was because there was not a whole lot of new listings. And the new listings that did come to the market sold very quick. You know, if you look in the downtown core of Toronto specifically, we're still seeing on the condominium type properties, 5, 10, almost 15 offers. So, it really depends on what pocket of the market you're looking to buy in.
Yeah, I did want to touch on that because as we know that this drop means that they have reached their lowest sales in 3 years.
Yep.
But in terms of the next few months, you mentioned condo markets. I'm also curious about house markets. Where do you see sales going?
I think we are going to see them go up. What's going to happen, though, and something that is really important that we need to look at is over the next few months, when the numbers come out every single month, we're comparing them to January to April of 2017, where we saw historical price growth over that time period. So we also have to take them with a grain of salt when we look at the numbers, but they will go up because at the end of the day, the demand is still stronger than the supply. And with these new regulations, there's still not a whole lot to choose from. And
Tom, you're an expert in this field. Sometimes those of us who aren't are kind of stunned, but when we see drops like the one I just mentioned, 14.5%.
Yep.
Surprising at all to you, or given that what we saw in terms of new rules coming into effect in January and that interest rate hike, perhaps not as surprising to somebody in your field?
Yeah, you know what? It's really not that surprising because with these new rules, we didn't see a whole lot of change in the urban markets. But you look at markets in Canada that were recovering or struggling markets, this has a big impact on them. And that means sales that are going to go down in those markets. And overall, we're going to see that on a Canadian scale.
Royal LePage agent Tom Storey, great to have you on our program. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Coming up.